Hello, Stratters. Nick here, known as the Exalted One on Magic the Gathering Online. Back with some more modern action after a little bit of a hiatus, and we will be playing black-white tokens. So I haven't made some videos in a little while, and part of that is that I've been playing a bit more paper Magic than I had prior. Playing in a couple PPTQs, and the deck that I have been playing is this black-white tokens deck, and I've been having some success with it. I was able to make a top 8 and be close in another event. So, kind of talking about how I arrived at this deck. I had a deck together. I couldn't even tell you what it was now for my store's PPTQ, but I had something together, felt reasonable about it, put it aside and thought, well, we'll be good to go tomorrow. And I started looking through my binder to find the stuff that I wanted to sell to the dealer that would be there. And I came across my playset of Bitterblossoms, and I thought, wow, Bitterblossom seems like it would be pretty well positioned right now. And so I wanted to play a deck that played Bitterblossom and played it well, and I think this is probably the best Bitterblossom deck that you can play in Modern. Really only the two would be this deck and Fairies, and I don't particularly like Fairies. I think that this is a little bit better of a deck. But anyways, I wanted to play Bitterblossom. Mostly because, in the same way that Lingering Souls can be a good card against Death Shadow, I think that Bitterblossom is similarly good. It has a similar effect. It's a little bit slower, it's a little bit more painful, but the ceiling's a lot higher on Bitterblossom. You can get a lot of tokens out of it. If you're able to, buff those tokens in any way, it turns out to be even more powerful. It's an enchantment, which is a really difficult card type to deal with, especially when a lot of people are playing colors and decks that don't deal with enchantments. And I don't know, I've just been pretty impressed with the card currently. So kind of look at the deck, I guess. We'd separate things like this, in that we have our token generating cards here. This is kind of the proactive core of the deck. So again, Bitterblossom we talked about. Raise the Alarm is just sort of a curve consideration. You have to play enough cards that are tokens to kind of make your synergies with Intangible Virtues and Anthem effects work. But you need to maintain a curve, so that's why Raise the Alarm's there. Intangible Virtue, just a great Anthem effect. Creature tokens get +1/+1 and have Vigilance, so you get to play a little bit of offense, defense, get some chip damage in, and maybe make some trades if the opponent attacks back. Things like that. Lingering Souls I've talked at length about through a lot of different video sets. Just a great grindy card, and even better in this deck when you're augmenting your spirits. Midnight Haunting, worse Lingering Souls, but you just again need a critical number of token making effects, and you need to maintain the curve, so Midnight Haunting makes the deck. And then 3 Gideon Ally of Zendikar, which, token maker with the 0 ability, -4, you get an emblem that gives creatures +1/+1, so an Anthem effect there. The plus ability can be pretty good if your opponent doesn't have, cards like Path to Exile or something like that. So it's just a really powerful card. People played, some number of Gideons in their sideboard or their Opzon decks, and I've been a lot more impressed with it here than I ever was there. For one thing, we're a 2-color deck. I guess just kind of look at the mana base here. A lot more consistent, a lot more basic lands to play against, Ghost Quarters, Path to Exiles, Blood Moons. A little bit less painful, and because of that, we're able to cast our Gideons a little bit better. Then this other pile here is our kind of interactive cards, so pretty much like we would see in an Opzon deck. Path and Push is removal. Sometimes the Lilianna Edict helps there. And similarly, Lilianna's discard, but we have targeted discard with Inquisitions and Thoughtseize. So this deck plays a lot like an Opzon deck, but instead of playing creatures like Tarmogoyf, Dark Confidant, Grimflayer, Scavenging Ooze, Siege Rhino, if you're into that, which are kind of poor against spot removal, you're playing these token effects, which are a little bit better against spot removal. In particular, Intangible Virtue and Bitterblossom I found to be very good right now, in that people aren't able to deal with enchantments. We also have 7 Planeswalkers in the deck, and that's another card type that's pretty difficult to deal with. So I found that this deck just kind of attacks the format in the right ways with the right card types, having sort of the right answers, and works out pretty well. Kind of other parts of the mana base, which would be our late game creature lands and utility lands. Shambling Vent, a little bit of life gain works well to offset the Bitterblossoms. Plays nicely with Gideon's emblem effect. Overall, I've been pretty impressed with this card since it's come out. And Vault of the Archangel kind of builds onto that. You could play Ghost Quarters or things like that, but I find that those aren't effective in the matchups that you want them in the way you want them to be effective. A lot of times, Ghost Quarting against like Eldrazi Tron, denying them their mana and putting yourself down mana is a little bit of a tough way to do it. But that is kind of a creature deck as well, so you get a little bit of utility out of the lifelink and death touch, as well as against other creature decks as well. So you can trade a Lingering Souls token for a Tasigur or a Thought-Knot Seer, make really good trades and gain a little bit of life for your troubles. I've been pretty impressed with this card as well, I have to say. So that's the main deck. Turning to the sideboard, can look at kind of all these 2-ofs, and on a lot of matchups you'll find maybe 2 pairs of 2-ofs that you'll bring in. We just kind of have a little bit of flexibility with our numbers. So like Ethersworn Canonist, we would bring in against Storm and Living End. Rest in Peace probably against Living End Dredge. Timely Reinforcements for Burn, but also for different aggro decks that might get ahead on board early. Collective Brutality, good card against Burn, Storm. An extra discard effect against decks that we want that against. Grafdigger's Cage, good against Dredge. Good against Collected Company decks. One thing I'll note is that I play a mix of Grafdigger's Cage and Rest in Peace. Particularly against Dredge, I think their best answer card is Maelstrom Pulse, because it handles artifacts or enchantments, so they don't have to be wondering whether they should bring in, Ancient Grudge or Nature's Claim. They can just, or maybe Golgari Charm or Ancient Grudge, something like that. They can just have Maelstrom Pulse, and it deals with whatever the card is. Also deals with things like Scavenging Ooze. But it also deals with, whatever permanent it is, no matter how many they have. So a lot of times you'll play Rest in Peace, and then you'll play your other Rest in Peace, because if they have a Nature's Claim, it prevents them from gaining any traction. But if they have Maelstrom Pulse, it doesn't matter. So for that reason, I have Grafdigger's Cage and Rest in Peace instead of, playing, 3 or 4 of one versus the other. And again, that added utility against like Collected Company decks is a reason to play Cage. 2 Sundering Growth, I found that disenchants have been pretty good for me. It's a little bit weird, but I don't know. I had one, and then it was very good for me, and I always wished that I had more. So I took out things like Ensnaring Bridge, sometimes like a Crucible Worlds against Eldrazi Tron, or being able to stump their mana if they're depending on Mind Stone, or like a Basilisk Collar. Detention Sphere out of these blue-white control decks, Pithing Needles on my Planeswalkers. There were a lot of different things that came up that I wanted to have a disenchant effect for. And Sundering Growth is just a good one when you're playing a token-based deck that you can, kill something and get an extra spirit. Similarly, that's why we're playing Timely Reinforcements for the token-making effect, because we can boost those soldiers if we get them, compared to some other life gain spell. Then lastly, we have a small number of sweepers here. Even though we're a deck that definitely commits to the board, it's good to have a reset button, or it's nice to have these against decks that maybe get to the board a little bit faster than us. So I have 1 Damnation, Zealous Persecution as well, which can be good for like mirror matches or something against like elves. And same with Engineered Explosives. You can kind of take out decks that flood the board with 1-drops, or maybe just have some critical 1-drops to take out. So this is the deck, Black-White Tokens, and I'll be playing it through a few matches for you this week. Hopefully you enjoy, and hopefully we find that the deck is well positioned on Magic Online metagame like I've found it is in the real world metagame, at least where I've been playing and having some success with it in these PPTQs. So stay tuned, Stratters. Hello, Stratters. Nick here with another match of Modern, playing Black-White Tokens. We're on the draw, and we have a fine hand. Go ahead and keep. So we can go. See, this hand's a little bit better if our opponent is on a creature deck, but we do have discard spell, removal, and a Lilianna. Okay, so Watery Grave into Serum Visions makes me think Grixis Death Shadow. Let's fire off this Inquisition. Alright, so Snapcaster Mage is the card we should take if we're worried about the long term. See, so they have 2 cards in graveyard, 3 plus another 3. They could get a Tassiger and play next turn. So maybe that's a reason to take Thought Scour. If I take Thought Scour, it's 3 cards in graveyard, 4 with the Delta. They have 2 lands, so it really doesn't matter. Yeah, so I guess Snapcaster Mage, the math works out so that they'll be able to delve out a Tassiger even if I take that. I guess if I take the Thought Scour, that means that they'll be able to delve out the Tassiger, but they aren't going to be left with selection. I don't know if that's important, though. Go here, and then I'm going to pass the Tassiger on upkeep. So I could take a hit. It is a little bit bad to be giving the opponent a land this early in the game. Looks like they already have plenty of lands. What do we have here? Okay, Snapcaster, Serum Visions. Okay, so I'm going to Fatal Push the Snapcaster, play Lilianna on an empty board. Probably discard this other Lilianna, but I might discard my land drop. I could also save the Fatal Push and Edict, but I think this works out better in case the opponent has a discard spell. And Swamp's a pretty uninspiring draw, so I'm going to discard that. The opponent might lean towards playing out some creatures to kind of chew at the loyalty here, or for example using like a Kolaghan's Command to deal 2. Okay, they're going to get my other Lilianna regardless. So we know that they have, that's their Delve pile, I want the revealed cards. Pretty sure they played this Delta. So we know we have a Terminate. This is nice because we get to play around Stubborn Denial with our Bitterblossom. Take up this. And they'll probably discard the Terminate. Or maybe if they have some dead card, they'll discard that. Yeah, land. Not very useful here. And Lilianna on 5 loyalty with a Bitterblossom in play seems like a... Yeah. That was my diagnosis of the situation, too. Alright. So I do think this matchup actually is like pretty reasonable. So they can't deal with a lot of these enchantments and tokens their removal doesn't line up well against. I think Rest in Peace is pretty good. I think that this is fine. And Thoughtseize is the better discard spell because we want to be able to hit their delve creatures if that's the way our hand lines up. So I think this is the way I want to board. I used to have more cards kind of dedicated to this matchup in the sideboard, but I found that it, again, was actually not that bad. I mean, you have, again, plenty of removal with the paths, and Lilianna can be removal sometimes. Bitterblossom is a very difficult card for them to deal with, same with Lingering Souls. Virtue, they can't get off the table. Gideon, if it resolves, is quite good. So I have fewer cards. I used to have like a Celestial Purge, some things like that in the sideboard, or Mirren Crusader, but I just found that it's kind of, I felt like I could use the percentage points elsewhere, so I think this is the touch that I'm going to take with sideboarding. Rest in Peace, shutting off like the Snapcasters and then making their delve threats incredibly expensive seems pretty good, as well as shutting off recursion with Kolaghan's Command. Versus my deck only has the Lingering Souls. Okay. Yeah, again, the sand looks good. It's pretty resilient to being shredded by discard. Couple pieces of removal, couple threats, and forms of our token makers and a planeswalker. Okay, take the Bitterblossom. That makes a lot of sense since that's the card that's hardest for them to deal with. Just fetch up a tapped land here. Also, if we don't draw another land, then it's kind of the best card for us to cast. Okay, big fish. And I think we're going to bite the bullet here in Path again. We just want to preserve our life total. We don't want to open up our path to getting Stubborn Annihilated. Plus, if we draw a Bitterblossom, we want to play that next turn. Not exactly what we were hoping for, but this is also fine. Makes our Lingering Souls a little bit better. Really need to draw a land, though. I guess if we don't draw a land, we do have some removal to sit on, but sooner or later we're going to want it. Oh, they cast a Death Shadow when they were above 13 life. They had a fetch land too. Well, this is clearly a concession of shame. Yeah, if they just crack this fetch, find like a Blood Crypt, then play it, they'll be in alright shape. I guess they would go to 11, which would make this only a 2-2. So our Fatal Push would be online, and they wouldn't have a Stubborn Denial. Let's see what we're going to draw. Okay, we're going to draw land. So given that, let me think about how this would have played out a little bit. I don't think I would play Lilianna because I don't want to play into Stubborn Denial. I have a Fatal Push, which takes care of the Death Shadow, so I think I'd probably just play land, play Fatal Push. That leaves Path up if they have another threat. Then go to the next turn, see what we draw. Is it going to kick me out? No, I want to see what I would have had. Then we probably play Lingering Souls, since I don't care if that gets Stubborn Denialed. Maybe follow that up with the Liliana. It was a shame we didn't get to see the match go to its natural conclusion, but I don't know. I think drawing this third land, I feel like I'm in a really good shape this game. Again, we just so much removal and a lot of things that they have a hard time dealing with. Well, thank you for watching, Stratters. Stay tuned for the rest of the videos.